Hey Elliot, how's it going?
Pretty good. How about you, Josh?
Oh, I'm just sitting here trying to continue to have a proper life balance and early retirement. I find myself in a situation here lately where I feel like I have a bit of a part-time job. I'm in the middle of a tenant turnover and doing a light rehab on a house these last couple weeks. And this week I had to drive into the city three different occasions. It felt a little bit like I was kind of back to work because I was making the drive in and out in the normal, well, I kind of tried to schedule around the heaviest traffic, but it still kind of felt like I was back in the flow a little bit with the other rest of the world that's going to work during the week.
Yep. I mean, but it's totally passive, right?
Yeah, real estate investing is totally passive. It's definitely not. And that's okay. I knew that it was gonna be this way to an extent, and this is not something that came about by surprise. And luckily, we're in a situation where we can kind of actively just do the work that we want to do without being in a major rush to get the property turned over and get a new tenant in there right away. And we're able to take advantage of the time to do some work to the property that we've known that needs to be done. And it's been nice to, I only work like 4 or 5 hours a day, but the drive is tough, the hardest part. And that was always what I would say about my when I had a job too. The commute was just the worst absolute part of it.
Yes, absolutely. I share all of those feelings. Is I had to go. I was telling you before we hit record that my executive vice president at work was in town this week, and so I actually, you know, my I'm required to go into the office 3 days a week, and I had a meeting planned with the senior vice president for Wednesday, and it actually got pushed to Thursday. So I had a come to Jesus moment where I was like, all right, am I going to cancel on the senior vice president and make myself look bad, or am I going to do the unthinkable and commute into the office for the fourth day this week? So unfortunately, I mean, good, better, and different. I say this all pretty lightheartedly. I went into the office to have that nice conversation, as that person isn't based out of my same office.
Yeah, well, luckily it's just a one-time thing, hopefully, and you're not looking to go 4 days a week this coming week, and it'll be all right.
Absolutely not. Yeah, back back to regularly scheduled programming. So yes, and before we get too far away from the point that you just made, yes, you're two jobs down to one job. I'm glad that yes, it's only part-time hours to still get a nice return.
It's kind of funny though, because I've had to say no to some other things that I either had on my calendar or that I knew were kind of coming up. So it's always a trade-off. You can't do it all. And this was just a kind of a dose of reality that this is a part of my life that I need to make sure that I at least have some strong level of focus towards. It's a real estate, it's a small business. And we talked before about how I can hire this stuff out, but this is kind of like a situation where we didn't really want to hand this off to somebody else. We want to just go ahead and do the repairs ourselves. It's most of it's pretty, I would call it like a very light rehab. So we're painting, we're making some minor repairs, but it's going to take us some time. And we talked about it this morning that there's a really good chance that we might be working on this for the next couple of months. And like, we're just going to have to be okay with that. But luckily, we're not in a situation where it's like, oh, shoot, we have to turn this around and let's get this rented out as quickly as possible. And a couple of silver linings along with that I've been working on for this year, since I'm no longer a W-2 employee, is that I can now qualify for real estate professional status on our tax returns. So I don't know all the details that go into that, but the IRS doesn't see you as having the ability to actively participate in the business when you have a full-time job. So now that I no longer have that, I can, as long as I actively participate for 750 hours in a calendar year, I can select that in our taxes. So now I'm in a situation where I'm documenting like everything that we do, everything that all the time that I'm spending and getting very detailed with that, which I hadn't done in the past. And that's brought on like another level of like, oh, okay, well, I now I can see like how much time and effort that I'm actually putting into these, because sometimes it feels like it's a lot, other times it feels like it's not so much. And we're only 6 weeks into the year right now, but now I can reflect back and go, oh, okay, this is how much time these properties are going to be really, I'm going to be spending on these. And we'll see if this is going to be a viable option for us long term. Like, does it turn into a lot more time than it's worth? And do we want to pivot from that or something? So yeah, that's the other thing that's going on with me real quick. I'll give you an update is that we've talked a lot about Lori trying to work towards dropping down to some level of part-time, and she's taking very small steps towards that. So the last couple of weeks, she's taken basically half of a day off, and she works a four tens. So she's been coming or leaving half a day early on Thursdays, and so far so good. And I think next week she's got a day, Wednesday, is she's going to be cutting that day down as well. So making some progress there towards Lori being part time, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah, no, that's super exciting. And I know I'll get to see Lori next week, so I'll have to make sure that I give her the proper kudos that she deserves in person. So,
I'll probably cringe like, oh,
yes.
I don't want to talk about it. It's stressing me out.
Yeah, right. Anything to just make your life a little bit harder, Josh.
Yeah,
I mean,
thank
I
you.
think
Thank
you
you for
need a
that.
little stress in your life. So, I'll be happy to provide that little bit. So,
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, let's turn the focus to you in this episode. Let's talk about the cat's out of the bag here. It's been all over the local scene. Elliot's big life decision. Elliot and his family have made the decision to move to France later this year.
right.
Let's talk about it.
Let's do it. Yeah, as you just put, we are relocating myself and my family of five in total of us to France. Looking to do that in September here in 2026 is when schools start in France. And so we are making the decision to enroll our children in French public school, and that starts September 1st. So we want to make sure that they're all set up and squared away to start the school year in the fall.
Super exciting stuff. And for me, just hearing that gives me like a bit of, I would call it like anxiety of like, wow, a lot has to happen between now and essentially, what are we looking at? 6, 7 months from now?
Yeah, yeah. It's basically 6 months from now. Yeah.
And I would imagine you would have to almost like project management this
hmm
from now until then. Like my corporate speaker is escaping me. What is it that like a Gantt chart? You almost need a
Oh
Gantt
yeah.
chart that is putting
Oh,
all the pieces together between now and then.
absolutely. Yeah. As someone who just drew up a Gantt chart for my exec this past week, and like we mentioned in our last episode, I think is, it's career objective setting season in the corporate world. Yes, I am certainly project managing my own life right now and all the activities that have to occur in order for this to be a smooth transition, or as smooth as it can be.
Yeah. So I have a whole series of questions here that I'm looking forward to asking you, but I guess just to kind of continue with that same thought of a Gantt chart, project managing it. Are you at a point right now? Have you mapped it out to where it's like you're deep into it at the moment, or is it still kind of like we don't really have to be doing a lot of these big ticket items until a little bit further down the road? Like where are you in the journey, so to speak?
Sure. We have done a step that I think if anybody was considering something similar is we have found through research actually a family that has done something similar. They moved from Colorado to France, and I think I can only assume they run a YouTube channel. I think is one of their income streams now is helping other Americans undertake this a similar journey. And so we purchased essentially a course from them that had things like a basically like a Gantt chart. I mean, they called it a checklist, but it was a time bucketed checklist to say, all right, hey, a year out, here's what you would do. 6 months out, this is what you do. 3 weeks out, this is what you do. And make sure that you've kind of dotted your I's, crossed your T's. We bought that for, I forget if it was 100, I mean, between 100 and 150 euros, right? I think was just the same reason that you go out and you hire a coach or take a class, whatever, to uncover, you don't know what you don't know and try and find some of those gotchas before we fall into those pitfalls. So at least in that respect, somebody that is actually deriving income from this on the other side has done a lot of the quote unquote hard work for us in trying to help outline what are these major milestones that you have to accomplish.
Is there anything from that checklist that you guys are perhaps behind on or that they recommended it should have been started by now?
Now I would have to have it in front of me, which would probably be a good idea, but no, I don't think so. I mean, of course, I think in general, as Americans, we like to plan more than probably any other country. Planning is just, I think, inherent in so much of our society that we just feel like, yeah, hey, I gotta plan to have a plan, and I need to go execute a plan. I have to have goals for my goals. Sure. The benefit of my unique situation is that my wife has dual citizenship in Italy. My kids have the same because it's passed on immediately. Once my wife was able to get citizenship, it's passed on anybody by blood to her. And so, 4 out of 5 of us are kind of set as far as the major milestone of, getting visas, getting into the country. They don't have to do anything specific because they're EU citizens. They can live where in the EU. The major part, or how I get to kind of follow along, so to speak, is I qualify for a familial visa. So, being the spouse of an EU citizen, I don't really have to do anything beyond show up in France and then register and say, I'm here. And that's how I get to apply in person once I'm there. That process is still a multi-month long process, but a few stipulations are like they can't just go evict me out of the country. Like any American, we in France, you get 90 days before you would have to be out of the country and actually outside of the Schengen zone, I believe. Don't quote me on any of this. I am certainly not an expert, but I believe that all to be true. And once I've applied for this familial visa, basically while it is processing, they don't just like kick you out of the country and mess with my life.
So why France?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different answers to that. And I would say, this is a five podcast. So I'll start out with the super nerdy reason is the tax implications of living in France are much more favorable as a US citizen as opposed to other countries that we personally were looking at. So it's essentially there's a dual tax treaty between the US and France that minimizes how certain forms of income are taxed. So, and once again, I'm not an expert on this. This is just my own interpretation. Don't take any of this as tax advice or anything of that nature. But from what I understand, it is income that is earned in France is taxed in France. Income that it was earned in the US is taxed in the US. So regardless of where you live as a US citizen, you will always pay tax at you will always pay US taxes. The way that it works in France is you will also be taxed in France, but if you have already paid tax somewhere else, essentially they give you a credit offsetting the tax that you have already paid elsewhere. And so it essentially nets to zero for France. So the big caveat here, or the TLDR, is long-term capital gains in France are taxed at essentially US rates. So I can live in France even though it would just be like if I was living here in the US.
Yeah, that's nice.
But all of the other non just financial reasons, French culture is something that we're definitely excited about. Getting our kids exposed to that culture, that pace of life, the food, the drinks for us adults, the exposing our children to language. So we have the full expectation that they will be bilingual, enrolling them in French public school, which is very well known for being a very top tier education system. The weather in where we're looking to potentially locate to, we're actually taking a trip here in March to find our exact location of where we're going, is potentially going to be southwestern France. So really, if I compare that to St. Louis, weather is will be closer to having 3 seasons as opposed to 4. It really doesn't get really any higher than, I would say, low to mid 80s in that area, and it really doesn't get any colder than, I mean, you may see some snow, you may see a little bit dip below a 30s or low 30s, but it's going to be a light dusting. It's not going to be the same as snowpocalypse that could be around here sometimes.
It's a lot more consistent throughout the year. Not it doesn't peak too high or too low. It sounds like
Yeah. Yeah, and then
nice.
small little things like free healthcare and free education. So that
Oh, you're stealing my
those
thunder,
the
man. Those are some of
yeah.
my questions.
Yeah.
No, that's
So
good. So those are some of the significant opportunities. Is there any problems that this move solves for your family, or is it just purely based on opportunity?
yeah, I mean, I think it certainly is just taking advantage of opportunities. I mean, it does certainly speed up the time to FI if we move to France. I think by all measures, I called it we're French fry. So we are. It's a lower cost of living area there than it is here in St. Louis, and so yeah, that certainly is a problem. It also does solve the problem of saving up for education costs. I wouldn't say that we have fully saved what we were intending to save here in the US. So yeah, if our kids elect to go to school in the EU, that's much cheaper or free in many cases. I mean, they have to pass certain exams. It's not quite the same system like it is in the US, where you go take a test and pay some money and you're in. It's just different. And then yeah, I mean, healthcare costs is certainly a something that any early retiree or just any US citizen really needs to solve for, especially later in life. And yeah, I mean, the fact that it is a nationalized healthcare system is certainly solving a question mark that I think always Americans weigh heavily on their financial trajectory of their life.
I remember you were saying that I guess the cost of living overall was going to be lower. And was that just I don't remember what the percentage was, but if it were just like rough numbers, I think you were saying something along the lines of maybe 25% cheaper to live in France in the areas that you were looking at. Is that just because of the healthcare and education costs, or is that just general day-to-day living costs that are cheaper as well? And I guess just to kind of continue on that, is there anything that you know of that's going to be significantly lower or significantly higher aside
Sure.
from like the healthcare and education?
Yeah, I think the biggest or the way that I'll respond to that first is, I've never lived there before. I don't know what town we're going to live in for sure. So of course, results may vary, but we know we're not living in Paris, right? And Paris is expensive. It's on par with any of the other, most expensive cities in the world. But outside of Paris, the rest of France is very affordable, I would say, by and large. Now, I wouldn't say Côte d'Azur and maybe Provence and some other places. Yeah, like you're going to have expensive places. Thanks George Clooney for moving to Côte d'Azur. Now, no. Yes, the French Riviera and living on oceans, that's always going to be expensive. And sure, proximity to the Swiss Alps and yeah, places that you want to be, that's going to increase cost. But yeah, specifically the area that we're looking to be in, which is more French countryside, smaller villages or towns, you know, we used a couple of different sources, like I said. So we had the course that we bought, and it gives some approximations on what you would expect cost of living to be like. But there is somebody unrelated to that course that we bought that I think does something similar in model to what this other couple or this other family does. It wouldn't surprise me that she's in the fire community based off her handle on YouTube. She is a mother, family of four in Dijon. She actually puts out her family's spend every year. So she's done it for the last 2 years, I should say. So 2025, 2024 numbers are out there in full on YouTube for anybody to look at. I mean, she's got a bunch of videos that talk through, difference in cost of living. We've gone to numerous sites that try and give approximations of what cost of living comparatively actually looks like. But for example, that family of four in Dijon has a population of approximately 160,000 people. So, I mean, that's a larger city for France. Family of four is living for approximately 55,000 US dollars in a year. So, I mean, compared to my family's annual spend, that was not quite half, but that's pretty close to half. And, I mean, I think that of course there are different things to consider, and obviously people live different lifestyles and everything else like that, but I would imagine just living in a city in general is going to be more expensive than living in the countryside. The one major caveat to that is transportation, so having a car. Gasoline is much more expensive in France than it is in the US. So trying to see, okay, if we're living in the countryside, do we buy electric? How all does that work? Opens doors about getting French driver's license. That's a whole nother conversation. So yeah, it's not without its own problems, but yep. I mean, new and exciting problems to solve.
Are you guys thinking about renting or buying when you move there?
Yeah, I think we'll definitely rent initially. We don't want to get into a situation where, with even the little bit of time that we go, I mean, I think that's hard to say, yep, hey, this was the perfect spot that we selected right on the first time, and we just feel great about it. So I think at least initially renting to kind of feel it out, make sure that we've made a good decision is how we'll act.
You live in a pretty, I guess I would call it a fairly densely populated area right now. Do you think that those areas that you're looking at are comparable, or is it going to be more? Because when you say countryside, I think of it being pretty rural. Do you think
Yeah,
it's going to be more like that?
I think it is going to be more like that. I think if we were to live in a city center, it would be even more dense than where we currently live. So you kind of get there's much more variability. Like either you're going to be in a city center and you don't have a yard in most cases. Like you may have a small yard, but that comes at a pretty high premium. And our idea is to have still have some semblance of a yard. So yeah, I mean, I don't think that we're trying to have like acreage or anything like that. We're not trying to be farmers or, but I think what you're going to run into is, yeah, it is like your neighbors may be farmers. And I mean, that's fine by us. So,
Yeah. You've lived in the city or in the suburbs of the city your entire life, really, right? So is there any apprehension that you have towards like giving up that convenience and being super close to things? Because we joke about it all the time. I mean, between where I live and you live, there's an easy half an hour added to like literally everywhere we go, and you're there in 10 minutes.
right.
Does that part of it excite you or make you nervous? Are you indifferent about that?
I think it's certainly some of both, right? And I think it's the what what are we trying to get out of our move and what do we want our life to look like? Of course, I think when a lot of people think of France, they just think of Paris, right? And just this romanticized version of, hey, I have this house or this apartment. I go downstairs, I go to my local bakery, I go to my market, I go to, you just walk everywhere. You can hop on a metro and, you can bike everywhere. And certainly being out in the countryside, I think it's different than that, right? Is that you will have to have really a car to truly truly survive unless you are pretty close to the city. It's one thing to be like, oh yeah, we're a couple 1 to 3 kilometers away from a city center. That's one thing versus saying, yeah, hey, I'm 10 kilometers. So yeah, we use those numbers because at least for our runner friends out there, yeah, 3.1 miles or 6.2 miles away from a city center, like it's much more reasonable. How long does it take me to run a 5K? Is I'd probably be lucky to pass 30 minutes, whereas hop on a bike or something like that, you can do it obviously much faster. But yeah, I wouldn't want to probably be biking a 10K every time I just want to go into the city. I probably would want to have a car.
So what's been the hardest part of this process so far?
Picking a locale, I think, has certainly been the hardest part. I mean, so I heard the analogy in our research of France is basically the size of Texas, and Texas has approximately, I call it 2,200 different municipalities in it. France has over 34,000. So every little town is its own municipality and kind of government. They have, it's called a mairie or a town hall. So each one of these is going to be kind of its own unique little entity. And so, how do you, as a complete outsider, choose where you want to live? I mean, to your point, I've never lived outside of the state of Missouri. I have lived in St. Louis City, St. Louis County, and Rolla, Missouri. Like those are the three places that I have ever lived in my entire life. So, yeah, it's a big deal to turn around and hop across an ocean and say, "Yep, I want to go there." So trying to ascertain why there, and I've tried to really think about it in the way of saying the reason that I'm here obviously is I was born here, my family is here. In some ways had to think about it and I have friends here and everything else, community, etc. But if those things weren't true, how would I pick where to live in the world? So that was quite a thought exercise in and of itself.
Yeah. So what are you doing with all of your stuff? Selling it? You storing it? Keep it hanging on to anything?
So that's a good question. Right now, the plan is that we are holding on to our house, that we're going to rent our house, just try and get long-term rentals, just probably do a year right off the bat and try and get that all set up. The thought pattern of whether or not we would rent it furnished or not certainly has crossed our mind, but honestly, in our opinion, we're not really in a spot where I think that is a huge plus for many people looking in our area. Like the reason that I think most people would come to our area is the school district more than anything else. You know, it's a family looking to get into our district. And, you know, if I was on the other side of this, most cases I have my own stuff. I want to move my own stuff into my own house. So in that thought exercise, I think we're going to sell most of our stuff. You know, we will keep probably keepsakes and things of that nature, but by and large, we're kind of going pretty wholesale. I didn't want to entertain the thought pattern of storage of things. I think the minute that you store things might as well be gone from my mind at that point. Not to mention, you know, paying to keep things in a box somewhere.
On the other side, when you move and rent, will you be looking for a place that's already furnished, or are you gonna start from scratch?
Yeah, so it by and large, you can find furnished places fairly easy in France, from my understanding. The definition of what is furnished versus unfurnished is very different in France. So, an unfurnished house, they can take it all the way down. They can take the light fixtures. All they have to do is leave you basically socket and a bulb. So appliances don't have to be there. So yeah, just very different than, you know, what I think a typical American thinks of an unfurnished or a furnished house.
Furnished would be some level of actual furniture.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
actual furniture there. And obviously some things we will, I'm sure we will buy right away and whatever else.
So what are you most excited about and what are you most nervous about?
Well, certainly I'm excited about the possibility of just truly being French fry, French fry, so to speak. Yeah, that sounds pretty awesome to me. Is enjoying true retirement is I would say I am having moments of what almost seems like senioritis is the best analogy that I can have is knowing that I have a quote unquote end date in which I will no longer be in this country is I mean I'm still doing high quality work and everything, but at the end of the day either work is going to accept my petition to continue my job remotely or they're not. And I can obviously go try and get more work, but I think where I'm at is I'm pretty burned out. I think is the best summation of how I feel. And so yeah, I would rather just try five. That's what I am most excited about. Not to mention some good wine, cheese, food, etc. That sounds pretty good. And you said, how did you phrase it? What am I most scared of?
Most nervous about?
Yeah, most nervous about. I mean, of course, like language. My French is not my my French is not strong by any means. It is. I took 5 years of French, eighth grade through my senior year. I'm probably good enough at French to order at a cafe or at a restaurant, something like that. But more than anything else, like I know the speed at which people speak is just very rapid compared to even what I'm accustomed to from even when I took French. You know, it's like, yeah, you know, teachers always try and meet people where they're at as opposed to just people living their everyday life. So that the thought of not being near our family and friends, like just being isolated, you know, building community and friendships and everything else. Yeah, I mean that's anxiety inducing. But I think one of the places that's it's really kind of the I would say the leading choice right now that we're looking at as far as a region is very expat friendly to the tune of it's probably about 25% expats, mainly British expats. So that's nice to be able to have a little bit of a backstop. Now I'm not expecting, you know, Brits that are also probably our age to be there. I think we're certainly an anomaly, but at least, yeah, it's just trying to build a rapport with our new community.
Taking a little bit of a step back to a comment you made there when we were talking about what you're most excited about. You said something about getting other work or looking potentially if you needed to get other work that might be there. Can you talk more about what that would look like for you as being not a French citizen and what your potential limitations could be, if any?
Sure. Well, I haven't said this on the podcast, and I still won't say it on the podcast, but I work for a company that is a global company. There are opportunities to work in other countries that I could certainly go down that avenue if ultimately my proposition to my current boss is the answer is no, you cannot continue your current function remotely in France, then okay, I can try other avenues within my current company and see, hey, I know other people in Europe that could be an opportunity if I wanted to stay with my same company and find a new role, so to speak. Now, as far as actual legalities and everything else with that, like that's part of, I would say, going through like some of the check or milestones that I will go through right now is trying to see, is that actually possible? Is that something that I want to pursue? Because I have no idea if my company will, they may drastically change my pay rate to be commensurate with the cost of living. I know my company has an office in Paris, but I have no desire to go into the Paris office because, frankly, I don't desire to live in Paris. I've heard not great things as far as people that actually live in Paris. But as far as the familial visa that I spoke about earlier, it actually is one of the visas that allows me to work as soon as I'm granted said visa. Whereas that's very different for Americans. Usually, if you're staying long term, in most cases, that does not allow you to work. So that's very different.
Do you have any sense of what the culture is as far as like how they would like let's say you were going to get a part-time job at a winery or something along those lines, just something that's entry level. Do you know what the
Sure.
culture could potentially be like for a foreigner as opposed to like, favorability towards somebody that is a French citizen?
I don't, but I know that by and large, it's going to be, they're going to look for somebody that is fluent in French, and
Yeah.
I'm not. I think that's going to be the biggest impediment, at least short term impediment is the fact that I'm not fluent. And so, not to mention, like, just the cost benefit of doing that is the taxes are so much higher in France. It's like the wages are lower, the taxes are higher. So, does it actually make sense to actually go through that thought exercise? In my finger in the wind, the answer is no. Now, you get into a little bit different areas to say, okay, well, what if I had what if I started my own company that's US based and I can do it remotely? Well, okay, now we're talking about a different trajectory because now I'm just basically running a US company and I'm living in France.
So how are you thinking about this long term? Is this forever or an experiment?
As much as this will probably hurt your heart, Josh, I'm thinking of it as a long term or certainly as quite a while. I think the intent is it would at least be multiple years. I mean, I think the main function more than anything else is to give our children the opportunity to learn new language, see a different culture. I don't even want to delve into the grenade that is American politics right now, but as anybody who is an American can infer from my statement, yeah, we don't love what's going on here right now. So yeah, I mean, I think we're at least going to be there for a little while, and then more long term. I mean, who knows?
Just so that it's on the record, you're not hurting my feelings, Elliot.
well,
I will
well, good.
gladly take a trip, an annual trip to France to come visit you. And I imagine you'll be back here a couple times a year or at least once a year.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, and certainly, I've got family here, so it's not like I'm never going to see my family ever again. So I certainly we will make trips here. They will make trips there, hopefully. And yeah, it'll happen.
So maybe a bit of a dark question here, but have you guys gone through the exercise of really thinking through like what could potentially stop this from happening?
I mean, I don't think that that's a dark question. I think that's I mean, true reality of making such a large decision like we're making. No, like, I mean, like, certainly we have tried to think through, like, I have definitely gone through my mind, like, what would have to happen in order for us to say, yeah, this was a catastrophic failure. Time to undo everything we just did, and let's hightail it back.
Or even maybe stop before you even get started. As maybe what I was asking is like
Okay.
between now and the next 6 or 7 months, is there anything that you would say this could change our course?
It would have to be something pretty major. It would have to be like major major family situation, like a death in the family or
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah, it would have to be pretty stark, I think. Otherwise,
Okay.
I've probably gone I've been more gung ho about telling people than
Yes, you
uh
have.
I think, and you've seen more people that I'm more okay with telling. But yeah, I mean, I think in some ways, to me, that is a way that I put myself in a situation to say, "Hey, I'm committed to this. I'm going to do it." And
It's
I'm
real.
I'm not giving myself kind of an out in that way.
Yeah.
Now, only if I could do the same thing with my health quest, I'll eventually be accountable to somebody.
We'll save that for next time. That way you have another week to maybe see if we can move the needle there at all.
Yes, exactly.
I guess just a couple more here as we're wrapping up. So if you were to look in your crystal ball like 5 years from now, as you sit here and you've thought through all of this stuff, and what does like success look like?
Man, 5 years from now, I would hope that everybody in my family we're all fluent in French. We're enjoying, I mean, that would put my kids, I would almost have a teenager at that point. And yeah, I mean, they're all squarely preteens. So yeah, I mean, I think we're just kind of enjoying life at that point is, something that is very different in France than the US is the schedule just for even school days. So in France, kids do not go to school on, at least in like elementary school, they don't go to school at all on Wednesdays. And then as they get older, they go half days on Wednesdays. And but how that also plays out is the time that they're at school Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday is they're there for longer days. And so that's going to be very new and different, I think, to both Dawn and myself, is to really be living the FI lifestyle almost as soon as we get there and having a lot more time back to ourselves that we haven't had for the last, you know, not quite 10 years, but more than five. So, what comes along with that is also it's like every 6 weeks, schools get a break. So, part of that is kind of built in travel opportunities. So, opportunities for us to travel kind of more locally, but in that area. So, whether that's Europe or Asia or wherever, just areas of the world that really aren't near as accessible to the US because of just how long it takes to get there. And the only thing that really changes is summer vacation for for French students is shorter than like Americans. So instead of 3 months, it's closer to two. But yeah.
Very cool. One final question that I have is, how are your kids thinking through this? Do they have a pretty good understanding of what this means to their lives as they know it? Are they excited? They nervous, or they just don't even really feel like it's real at this point?
Yeah, I think they're all getting excited. There was definitely some early resistance from my daughter, and I think that's based upon the fact that she's got friends that she's had for a number of years now. She's has friends in the neighborhood, has friends at school, has different clubs or sports and things that she does. And so it's hard for any person at any point in their life to think like, yeah, I'm not going to be around those people that obviously I've built my life around, which is exactly why we're going when we're going. Is we my sons are kind of in their last year of pre-K, so before they kind of build more roots of going to a new school and building more, stronger connections and bonds, we wanted to try and say, hey, this is a nice kind of breaking point that we go try it out right now, because I think the further and further that we would delay that decision would just make that decision that much harder at that time. And I think the probability of it actually occurring would go down along with it. And I think that would leave myself and Dawn with regret ultimately of, the what if we had done that. And so that's ultimately the decision of why we've decided to go now.
Well, it's exciting stuff, and I imagine that this will be a ongoing common theme of our discussions for the foreseeable future, really, because there's a lot that you're going to have to go through and we can talk through all these things and continue to make it a theme. But is there anything else that you maybe want to share now as it's related to this topic, or are we just gonna kind of touch on things as they come along in the months ahead?
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't think I have any other giant bombs to drop, so to speak. This is definitely the big one. But yeah, no, I mean, I think it's certainly going to be a continuing conversation. And, we've started to do things like minimize things around our house and start to think about, okay, before we get this thing, is it actually going to make the trip to France? No, I don't think so. So maybe we don't acquire this thing. And I think even that thought is entering our children's minds a little bit more. We're trying to help them understand that not everything's going to make the trip. And so how to help them make those hard decisions in their minds of what's important and kind of a non-negotiable versus, okay, I can let this thing go. So that's it's been a fun thought experiment. I mean, I think they're showing their eagerness. There is a app on our phones called StudyCat that basically just gamifies language learning that all three of the kids are very, I would say, in love with at this moment. So everybody is always pawing for a phone to try and play StudyCat right now, and it's cool to see.
Very good. Well, this has been a good conversation. I hope that it has been helpful for the listeners. I know there's probably a lot of questions out there, a lot of maybe people that are like, what the heck? Really? This is
Yes,
huge.
absolutely. So it is, I know, certainly out of the people that I have told, yeah, it certainly feels like it's coming out of left field for some. Others are like, oh, yeah, we maybe saw the writing on the wall as we've taken, trips in the past. But yeah, appreciate all the feedback. And of course, don't hesitate to reach out, and happy to answer any questions that I can. And certainly, if you were thinking about taking a similar journey, I'd love to hear your comments. And as always, if you stuck around with us, thanks. Give us a thumbs up, drop us any comments on YouTube or a podcast player of your choice. and Josh or I will get out there and answer them. We've been
Yep.
we've been trying to be pretty good about that. Josh is better than I am, but
You've had other things that have been, keeping your attention here lately, Elliot.
just a few things going on at the moment.
All right. Well, we'll call it here.
Yep, call it here. Until next
All
time.
right. Yep.
Thanks,
See you
Josh.
later, Elliot.
See ya.